Dr. Frances Cress Wessling just popped up on my Facebook Reels. Her thoughts are not new to me. It seems to me I have carried the same thoughts forever, like a place in the mind that was unlit, an instinct. And as I wonder why what she says makes such obvious sense, why I open to it where so many white men, perhaps white women, will not accept it, will recoil from it and against it. I have to acknowledge that it might be my childhood. I'm loath to use the traditional brought up because what happened to me, to us, has never seemed to jive with what others tell me this was for them and what it meant to them, this bringing up. I wasn't brought up really. I wasn't nurtured. I was exposed, and the home life made this exposure compatible, lovely. That is living for many of the first 11 years of my life as a minority in an Arab and then a colonial state in Iraq and Trinidad. And then from then to 17, adulthood in an unaware colonial state, the US of A. In a vivid boyhood that grew shadows rather quickly in my early teens, my images and memories of dignity are not white. Dignity are not white. They were African, East Indian, and Arabian. It was all too early for me to convert the rather poor figures I saw among my parents' generation into anything more than visceral. As my parents split up in an ugly fashion when I was 13, I had a need and a front row seat. My habit of exposure. My schools in Trinidad were not segregated. I think my primary school of 90 children represented 30 nationalities, and I think that was a world record. That is what Trinidad seemed to do by necessity. We were the minority, we white kids, but natural as things are to children. This is the world. My father was a foreigner even in England, white but Armenian, but the preoccupations of the empire he didn't possess. Those preoccupations, alive and well in the white world, still shock me. You're not the best, you're one among many. Try it. This must have come from him, my father, and my mother, though I know she missed England and wanted us brought up there, whatever that means, but we weren't. We took a sabbatical when I was 9, so had been Trinidadian for 2 years and a bit, but it was enough. And that happened to us. We became Trinidadian. The country was poor in US or English terms, but rich beyond the dreams of colonists. To a child, it was, and probably hopefully still is. Poverty was there. It is here too in the US, but there is something about the place combined with childhood. The carnival that makes such sense. I haven't been to Rio de Janeiro, the bigger, more famous one, but the Trinidadian one is a phenomenon, the equivalent of any European cultural event, and much more democratic, populist. We sabbaticaled back to England, and after 2 Trinidadian years, I was rejected by England like a bad seed. England shrugged me off. The school threw me away. I had the perfect metaphor for England. I was ejected from a soccer match on the sidelines as a substitute by the referee. I wasn't even playing. At this remove, I might say the one mistake of my life was the return to England 8 years later. It is what it is, but it was never mine, and I don't rue the past. Why is dignity crucial? Is it available in England? Of course. Somewhere, but not where she thinks. And I think I know why. Every empire, every culture with an impulse towards empire, any people who will write books glorifying their imperial past, obsess over Cromwell's and Henry's, has drained itself of dignity and replaced it with advertising in some long drawn-out psychic battle long ago, perhaps mistook it for wealth and centered it in its rulers. What fool imagines that the dissolution of the royals over the last generation into soap opera hasn't been its natural state for 1,300 years, soap opera rescued by Shakespeare and the other poets? Also, I remember buying my first record at 12 years old, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and even now I remember the dignity of its characters being what struck me. A Day in the Life, the benefit of Mr. Kite, the big brass band, the English carnival, the English poets, those scratchy working class Liverpool blokes, just what they were. She's leaving home. Later I heard it was this and that, but I remember what it was then. So, to the colony that thinks it's a uniqueness, America. Immediately we got here, the assassinations were in control. 67, 2 years since Malcolm, just before Martin. The sounds of Dr. King were everywhere, and then he was gone, and as my parents split, my exposure sped up without the protection it had once had, and it was time to grow up, to survive, which is, I suppose, what growing up is, and quite quickly the world was full of James Baldwin and Huey Newton, untainted by the imperative of the mystical forgiving of the founding fathers and then deifying them somehow. I remember Steinbeck as the great invisible observer of life, though to me Eldridge Cleaver was living that life. I understood the dragon has come. 15. It seemed to me the demand was for dignity. And no more. Dignity from a culture that just didn't know what it was. I understood those turbulent revolutionaries as an unattached, uncompromised boy does, or is free to. We look for reflections of dignity, we young boys, and here is where I wish I could have talked to Dr. Wessling, or just been in her presence. It seems to me that my white culture is practiced in self-oppressing, and its enthusiastic racism, its necessary racism, its psychological weakness that can only be allayed by a belief in its group superiority makes it temporary, irrelevant, undignified, unless, of course, its colonized minorities wish to be it, to participate in it, and its values, its massive, blatant weakness generates pathologies that the rest should avoid. To Westling's major argument, the diminution of the black father, I say the white culture fears the African and Arabian as it always has, the way it feared its own Gauls and Celts, and easily calls them primitive and diminishes them. That's what it does. It habitually folded into fear because that is its nature. Above all, my culture's unimpeachable belief is in the industrialized world it has created, its religions so unessential, so unconnected to the world that sustains us, its glorification of an economics that has always needed a serf-slave community to make it work, and the idiotic and criminal fantasy of finding another planet to pollute without qualms for the one we have destroyed, should not be emulated, should be walked away from. A woman posted on Threads the other day that the Democratic women in government right now are intelligent, talented, articulate, compassionate, while the electorate was none of these. The post had only likes, no comments, because very few would disagree. This is not really a need of enemies, as it is a need to believe in inherent superiority, which amounts to the same thing when the inferiors claim they're not. The backbone of a republic, by the way, not of a democracy. Democracy is populist. Republicanism assumes an elite. I have repeated ugly rows about Kamala Harris with people who think she is intelligent, articulate, talented, and compassionate, and who should compete again. And when she loses again, the rationale will be our racism, misogyny, and stupidity. It is a slight inversion, but only slight, of anti-Semitism. The only reason I could be criticized is your bigotry. That is the psychology of children. The revulsion about Donald Trump and the idolizing too are fascinating to me. He is an ordinary fellow, loved by ordinary people, and as an ordinary person, I myself have big problems with his politics, but not with him. I don't think he's inferior to me. The Democratic reviling of him smells like racism. The well-worn synaptic trail America has chosen and repeated over and over. He is to them, them inferior, uncivilized, like Graham Plattner, who exposed the truth that we like our rapists from Harvard alone. And they're not ashamed of this conclusion. It is so inherent to their lives and values. So as my Threads poster imagines, Kamala Harris lost the election because the people are stupid, racist, and misogynist. That was easy, and that position is the end of democracy, much more than January the 6th. I don't doubt the equivalent fascism in the Republicans, but I recognize it as theocratic, obedient, stupid. The Democrats have made the Republican Party and its voters the enemy as theocratically. The religion is deep, embedded, without rights or script. It is simply supremacist and will allow no other voice and will allow a lot of killing. This is not to say that the rest of humanity doesn't display brutalities and arrogances. We know the hells in Sudan and the Congo. And perhaps those cultures imagine they are the best the world has ever made too. But it is definitely what we imagine about ourselves without evidence.